Is everybody hearing okay? I see some thumbs ups. Awesome. Is everybody seeing my screen okay? Awesome. This is a good start to a Friday afternoon then. Something is working on my computer. This is good. We will get started in just another minute as we are admitting a bunch of people in. We had close to 200 people registered for this, so got to give everyone a moment to come on in.
And yes, Ashley, we are recording this and it will be available on our USBE assessment YouTube page by the end of next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, we recognize not everybody is available at the same time, but this time is the greatest amount when the greatest amount of people would be able to attend.
And if these are chats, I am not seeing any of these chats still.
Yes.
And as you all come in, if y'all don't mind, just muting your phones. Also help us with such a large group and feedback. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started as the Zoom doorbell has significantly slowed down. So, just before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. We do ask that you do stay on mute. If you do have a question, there are a couple of options that you can utilize. You can utilize the chat to ask a question. If you have a question specific to your situation and you want to ask it to just myself or Teresa, you can message by changing the chat drop down to just Teresa or Megan. If it's a question that will be beneficial for the whole group to hear, you can go ahead and ask it of everyone. We will be monitoring the chat as we go through this training and try to answer questions in real time as they come up. Also, if you need, then you can do the raise hand feature in your options, and you are welcome to come off of mute and ask your question audibly. This meeting is being transcribed, so if if you need any of those assistance tools, you can have the transcription. This training will also be recorded, and it will be posted on USBE's assessment YouTube page. So please be aware that this will be a public meeting, as it is, and it is also recorded in Zoom. So your name and or questions, or possibly your visual, if you have your camera on, might be seen, as this will be posted on a public page for USBE. So additionally, if you can, make sure that your name is your first and last name as it is displayed in Midas is updated. So however your name is displayed, that will help us as well to track attendance and those that can receive relicensure points in Midas as well. If you do not know how to change your name, you should be able to just hover over your picture or your participant name, and there should be 3 dots, and you should have a rename option available to you. I think with that, Teresa, are we okay to get started? Housekeeping done? All right. All right. Well, thank you all for being here with us this Friday afternoon. We hope you all have had a great start to the new year. We hope that your winter breaks were refreshing. And thank you so much for joining us. We got quite the big response from our last training, and we definitely got some feedback and realized the need to keep on messaging all the changes that are taking place with our English language arts assessments. So on this, oh, and thank you for group attendance. Thank you for putting that. On this first page, you will see our emails. Please note, we didn't put our phone numbers on there because honestly, we are typically in a lot of meetings and it's sometimes really difficult for us to actually get to answering a phone. But we can sneak peeks at emails a little more easily and we can respond faster normally in email. So please don't ever think that you emailing us is a burden. It is our job to support you all. So we love to hear from you and we love communicating with you. And we want your good questions and feedback because that helps us be better for you all. And with that, official introductions. I am Megan Lopez. I am the Utah State Board of Education Secondary English Language Arts Assessment Specialist. So I oversee the development of our RISE 6th, 7th, and 8th reading and writing assessment. And then I also oversee our Utah Aspire Plus 9th and 10th grade just reading test now. I also am the WIDA assessment specialist. That is our English language proficiency test for our English learners, multilingual learners. So I oversee the administration for grades K through 12. And then I am also one of the program managers for our state's legislated assessment to achievement program. So like you, wear many hats, so I know what it's like to have to be multitasking all the time. And with that, Teresa.
I'm Teresa McIntyre. I'm just the new assessment development coordinator over all of our content teams. So before that, well, technically I still am the elementary language arts assessment specialist as well over our Acadience reading, KEEP and PEEP, and then our RISE grades 3 through 5 until I get somebody hired to replace me.
Okay. So with today's training, we do have our learning intention and success criteria. As you know from your signing up with this, this is going to be solely focusing on the changes to the RISE writing assessments. So our hope is that you all can, by the end of the training, understand the changes to the RISE assessments. And how we will base this is if you can understand the steps in the RISE writing timeline with all the changes that are taking place, identify the differences with the RISE writing assessments, as there are different assessments in our RISE assessment suite, and then understand the new writing rubrics and prompt language for the actual assessments. So hopefully by the end of this, we'll be able to say, yes, we met all of these goals.
So we just wanted to start just making sure everybody's familiar with the different options that we have available. So we do have benchmarks available. We have ELA benchmarks, grades 3 through 8, and writing benchmarks as well for grades 3 through 8. So the ELA benchmarks are available right now. Our writing benchmarks are not quite available yet, but they will be available the middle of February. We do have our interims, which are again is optional. It's grades 3 through 8. We only have a reading interim available. It's not available this year because we just changed over all of our standards and we don't have those cut scores yet, but it will be available next year in 2025-26. And then our summative assessment is our required assessment. And for English language arts, that's grades 3 through 8. And then for writing, the summative is only grades 5 and 8.
I'm trying to figure out why my screen won't go back to full screen now.
So just our writing timeline, we have our optional field test for our writing benchmarks that's going to be happening starting in February. It is for grades 3 through 8, as we have written brand new writing benchmarks for all of those grades. So we have 4 prompts available for grades 3, 4, 6, 7, and then 6 prompts available for grades 5 and 8, because we know those teachers utilize the writing benchmarks a lot more, since that's where our summative assessment lies. So we'll be doing our benchmark range finding and have our summative assessment for grades 5 and 8. This summer, we'll be doing our summative range finding, which just means that we're figuring out what does a 2 paper look like? What does a 6 paper look like? And really figuring out those different levels and teaching our scoring engine on how to grade those student essays. Then the writing scores will be released in fall of 2026 after we've gone through all of that process and trained our scoring engine how to train it. And all of our essays this year will be hand scored and then scored using the scoring engine. And then we'll release those writing scores. So this training is being recorded, and so it will be available on the USBE Assessment YouTube page next week. So for our writing benchmark, it is available in grades 3 through 8. There's no automatic scoring this year because we are using the data from our writing benchmark to then train our scoring engine. So it is all brand new prompts. We have new prompt language and we have new rubrics. So we have to actually field test it in order to ensure those writing benchmarks are available in the future. So we need 5,000 student responses per essay in order to actually be able to train our scoring engine to provide accurate data. And right now we don't have enough. So we're hoping more people will choose to give those writing benchmarks so that we can continue to offer them. Because if we don't get enough students participate, we don't have enough to score them, and then we will not be able to offer writing benchmarks in the future. So there's my plug for signing up to participate in those writing benchmarks. And I'll be dropping a link in the chat if you are interested in giving those benchmarks or want to convince other teachers at your school or your district or charter school to participate as well. And yes, Tarlin, if you have teachers that would like to participate in range finding, go ahead and send us an email with those teachers' names and we can add them to our list.
One thing to just remember is that range finding, if you want to give the benchmark field test, you do not have to participate in the range finding. The range finding, there is going to be limited space in who can participate in that. So while yes, Taralyn, please send us a list of names of those who would like to participate in it. We do have limits on who can participate, and we have to ensure that those people and teachers participating in range finding are a representative group of all Utah educators that teach all Utah students as well. So just like any assessment development workshop, space is limited. This one will be a larger one, so we probably will be begging for participants. But again, the main point here is if we don't get enough teachers participating to just do the field test with their students, you don't have to do the range finding again, but actually just give their students these benchmarks, they're not going to exist anymore. We've got to get a very large sample of Utah students in order to validate this benchmark assessment.
And then to answer your question, Sherry, range finding is where we have a group of teachers and they just read student essays and they use the rubric to grade those and determine why this essay would be graded a 2 or this one would be graded a 4. And then we use all of that information to then train the AI scoring engine to be able to do that. So there's 4 writing benchmarks, 2 informational and 2 argumentative for grades 4 or 3, 4, 6, and 7. And then there's 6, so 3 of each for grades 5 and 8. No, so the teachers would not be grading them at all. They won't actually see the writing at all. It would just be submitted to through the RISE portal. And then we would have groups of teachers that would come in and they would be the ones who would grade them and then train our scoring engines to do that. So, and then we will have a delay in our ELA scores as well. So we will not see any automatic scoring for either the writing or the ELA assessment, because we do have to create new cut scores for like deciding what is a 1, 2, 3, 4 score proficiency for our ELA assessment as well, because it's new and our standards have changed.
I
And
want to really quickly, Teresa, take a quick step back because I'm getting a bunch of messages also in the chat that are private and not to everyone. Just as a reminder, this training today is solely focusing on the RISE writing changes. Next Friday, we are going to be doing a training that will be focusing on the reading, the ELA RISE test. Okay, so there are changes to both. Based on everyone's good feedback from the last training we did, we decided to divide them out so we could really focus first in on the writing assessment piece. And then next week, we will do a follow-up on just the ELA reading assessment. The benchmarks, again, remember we have 3, so I want to go back really quickly, and I apologize because we do have a lot of people coming in late, so remember it's recorded and you can go back and look, but we do have 3 different assessment options for RISE writing. There are benchmarks, sorry, and I apologize. Ugh, I hate when that pops up. I don't know if y'all are seeing this, but my computer does what it wants. Here's the news, you all. And it's not shutting off. So this is fun. Oh, there we go. And I apologize, I misspoke. There are 2 options for RISE writing. There are benchmarks or summative. Benchmarks are available to all grades. They are not required. So again, benchmarks available to all grades. Summative writing is just for grades 5th and 8th. Just 5th and 8th. Okay. And that is required. So with that, what we were just going over is the changes to all the RISE tests. All scores are going to be delayed this year. Okay. You won't get any scores till the fall. The first thing we wanted to focus on are the benchmarks for all grades, grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Again, not required. But if we want to have benchmarks in the future, we need to complete a field test of those benchmarks. So benchmarks and field tests are not different. We need to do a field test of the benchmarks. And that's going to be taking place very soon, February and March. We need as many people as possible to participate. So we really literally need thousands and thousands of students to take these benchmark tests. You will not get a score on these because these are going to be the student papers that help us train the engine for scoring these. Once we have enough student papers in the field test for the benchmarks, then we will do range finding, where we will have a group of educators that are paid to do the range finding. You will not be paid to participate in the field test. It'll be great practice for your students, though, for the summative, okay? But the range finding is where teachers will come and help grade those essays based on the new rubrics and help train our scoring engine. So hopefully we've addressed any confusion right off the bat, because I think the chat was blowing up. So with that, Teresa, do you feel comfortable moving on now?
Yes, and
Okay.
I think we have a date wrong on there. Um, yeah, it should be fall 25 is the writing scores release, not fall 26. So sorry.
No. Oh, yeah. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So it is fall
There's
25.
years change.
Yeah. Have we
All
used this
right.
before? Yes. That is copied from something else too. So that means it's been wrong multiple times. So we're sorry. It's fall 2025 that the writing and ELA scores will be available. So here, I'm going to drop the link to the survey. You don't have to complete it to participate in the fill test, but this is information we're collecting to see if we're going to have enough teachers and enough students participating in the writing benchmark fill tests, or if we need to start calling in favors and begging. So if you do plan on administering it, we would appreciate the doing, filling that out for us. The range finding is 100% compensated. The fill test is not, that's doing it with your students during the school day. You're already getting paid by your district to be there, to be teaching. The range finding that you're going to be doing on your own time, either if it's during the school year, we provide a substitute pay that does go to your district to pay for your substitute. If it's during the summer, we pay and provide compensation because you are not working. So we really please participate in this writing benchmark. It may not feel like it's really benefiting you this year, but it's going to benefit you a lot in future years as you're going to have those writing benchmarks available to utilize with your students with that automatic scoring, and you'll be able to see what the students wrote, which is a super nice feature that you can see what they're rating, and you can also look at it and look at how they scored and be able to better provide support for them, along with the scoring that aligns with the rubrics that is used for those summative assessments in 5th and 8th grade. Okay, next slide. So for our writing summative, that is only 5th and 8th grade. That's required, and that's in the spring. We do have all new prompts as well for our 5th and 8th grade, and we will not have the automatic scoring again. Range finding is going to happen in June for our summative assessment, and then those writing scores will be released fall of 2025. I know it's right on this slide.
We got it right. One place. And so again, to answer questions, teachers doing any summative or benchmark, you don't have to grade your own stuff unless you are part of the range finding committees. All right, so in the chat, are the prompts persuasive, opinion, argumentative? So based on our standards, since the new standards were just updated last year, and those were revised, it is argument and info explanatory. So no more is it opinion or persuasion. It's all considered argument. And then for one genre of writing, and then the other one is going to be informative or explanatory. So on this screen, you are going to see the language updates. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, my computer is having a fit, but I'm glad you all are not seeing it this time. So one of the changes that we wanted to make you all aware of is that the prompts, so the actual task that the students are asked to do when they open up the text, the test, they have their stimulus on one side, and then they have the actual writing prompt or task on the other side, and then the box where they actually compose their essays. That has been updated. So on this slide, you can see the update to the 5th grade writing prompts. On we're going to point out one of the biggest differences that you are going to note and see is on the informative explanatory. No longer does it say write a 2 to 3 paragraph essay. That's one of the biggest ones. We want students to write the appropriate amount of paragraphs in their essay to adequately answer the prompt. So I want to take a second for you all to make sure that you have time to read over these. And again, we will be sharing these slides as well, so you can see them, you can use them, you can share them. Okay. So we will share a link to the slides. They will be locked down so no one can edit them though. So it'll say, write an explanation about, and it'll give you the topic. Your explanation must be based on evidence and information that can be determined through through analysis of the blank passage set. So that's going to be the stimulus, those passages that are always provided. Then it'll remind them to introduce the topic, develop the topic using text evidence, show the relationship between the main idea and the text evidence, organize ideas in a logical way, and include a conclusion. And then it will always remind the students, as it did in the past, to manage their time carefully so they can plan, write, revise, and edit. We do realize that most of these, the planning, writing, revise, and editing, it is hard to do in one sitting or 2 sittings, however you break up how your students do these assessments. Most tend to do this in one sitting, but we do understand that this is on-demand writing, typically done in one sitting. So please note the changes that we see here. And then the argumentative one, again, more aligned to our revised standards. Again, write an essay in which you state a claim about a specific topic. Your essay must be based on evidence and information from the passage set provided. And this is what we're going to be looking for in that essay, stating a claim. So again, big shift. A claim is going to be different from trying to persuade someone or an opinion. We're taking that student out, right? That it uses text evidence to support the claim, includes connections that explain the evidence, organizes ideas in a logical way, and includes a conclusion. Again, reminders for the students to be successful in their writing as they plan, write, revise, and edit. You will probably see that it does not say elaboration. Elaboration is not in the standards, although it is heavily implied that students are expected to be elaborating. So it's that including connections that explain the evidence. That's how elaboration is now stated in the prompt. As we move on.
I will just add, Megan, real fast. The 3rd and 4th grade prompts for the benchmark are going to look just the same as that. So they still have all of those points outlining what students need to include in their writing.
A question of how many passages are going to be in the passage sets. In the upper grades, there's almost always 3 different pieces of text that the students can draw on.
And I will say in the younger grades, it's at least 2. Some of them are 3, depending on how long the actual content is. So we do have a limit on how many words can be included. So if the passages are shorter, some of them do include 3 or like 2 and then some type of graphic or a chart. But they definitely have less text.
The upper grades almost always 3. There are some rare instances, again, because we have a maximum amount. Sometimes there might be 4 if there is, like Teresa said, a graph or a chart or some kind of graphic. And Lauren, great question. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head right now. But you please follow up and send us an email because it's different kind of for all the different grade levels. And when I said 1 session, Every LEA gets to decide how they're going to do their tests. A lot of LEAs or districts, they will do it in one sitting, one test session. Some might actually do it over 2 different days, depending on their testing schedule. And that is something that your district or your charter, so your LEA, would determine. Are we using passages from the science and social studies content based? They're from all different subjects. A lot of them are based in for informative science and in social studies, but that's not a guarantee. One thing that we will say is we always have many educators and contact experts make sure that they are concepts that have been introduced in other subject areas. So they're not going to be giving content that they have not been introduced to in younger grades. All right, so again, you can see now the updated grade 8 prompts. Again, no more does it say 2 to 3 paragraphs, and students will never be penalized, and they were never penalized in the past if they wrote more than 3 paragraphs. We want them to be able to accurately understand what they are being asked to write about and actually address that. So whether it's 4 paragraphs, 6 paragraphs, 7 paragraphs, we want them to write the writing type that's appropriate for the task, right? So there are instances where maybe a student just needs to do a compare contrast in a lower grade. That's what their informative explanatory prompt is asking, and maybe 2 really well-written paragraphs is fine. But maybe more is warranted if they really wanted to flesh out a super strong introduction and conclusion. So again, we want students to understand what are they being asked to do and how do I appropriately respond. So it's not one size fits all writing necessarily. It's how do I respond and adequately respond to what I'm being asked to do. So again, very similar to the younger grades for info explanatory. Argumentative in the upper grades is where we're going to start to see more specific changes. Please note this red arrow for counterclaims. Counterclaims are not part of the 6th grade standards. So for the 6th grade benchmarks, they will not see addresses a counterclaim. Please also note that we have claim and claims in parentheses because sometimes there are multiple claims that can be made in our writing. So give you a moment to take a look at this. Now, please note that in 8th grade, we do use elaboration. In the younger grades, we're saying connections. And while elaboration is not in the standard, again, it's heavily implied because we want them to be drawing those connections and explaining those connections of the evidence they use to the reasons that are supporting their claims.
Did you see the question in the chat?
Well,
So for the grades 3, 4, and 5, it is not going to ever ask them to use a specific text structure with those informative prompts. It just tells them to provide, what is the language? Write an explanation about something. But I'm not sure on the upper grades.
And for the upper grades, we're never going to say, please write a cause and effect essay or a compare and contrast essay, but it might say, please explain the differences, and this is going to be a horrible off the top of my head example, but please explain the differences between dogs and cats, right? So then you know it's going to be compare and contrast. So we need to start to make sure that we're teaching our students what are the words that indicate the type of writing I need to do. Or please explain what led to World War II. Again, huge topic that 8th graders probably haven't gotten to again. So these are poor examples off the top of my head, but then knowing I'm going to write maybe cause and effect or steps, I might have to write sequence of events as well. 2 different writing types might actually be able to address the topic, and the student's going to have to choose which one's going to best address this topic that I'm being asked to write about. All right. So, we wanted you to be aware that the RISE writing training tests will be updated. We were hoping that they were going to be updated by today. We had a couple of technical issues on the RISE portal recently where things just weren't displaying, and even some errors were coming up with rubrics that we're trying to fix. So we have now changed this to they're going to be available at the end of January. But here is the link to the training tests for all of you. They should be available soon. So we are going to say, please just check back. We will make sure that all district and charter school assessment directors are aware once the writing training tests are available. Excuse me. And hopefully they will be messaging that out to all educators in their districts or charters. If not, we will make sure that we post an announcement on the RISE portal for when they are available. So again, if you don't have the RISE portal linked and favorited in your website menu, we would say definitely save a link and add this to your website, your website tabs that can be easily accessible, and just come back to it. Excuse me. It's been a long day. So again, we're greeting some great questions. Are students supposed to write with indents or put a line space between the paragraphs? Honestly, the formatting, they wouldn't be deducted on anything. I have always found it hard with the program to do an indent because I use tab, and that is not an option in the RISE platform. And so for me, you can do one or the other. The students can do a space or an indent, but either way, they're not going to be penalized for one or the other. We know that there are formatting concerns, and when we train the engine, indents or spacing between paragraphs will never deduct. We will be able to tell if it is just one huge run-on, however. Will fifth grade be using text structure writing? Or was that just for eighth? Teresa? Looks like
Yeah, I responded. Yeah, fifth grade doesn't apply a specific text structure. It's more just providing information about the topic.
Okay. So we wanted now to get into, since we've given you the updates on how their tasks or prompts are going to be changing, how are the students going to be actually assessed and graded on these and scored? So there has been a massive revision to the rubrics that are used to assess these essays and their writing. So we have created new rubrics, and we've done this in conjunction with our vendor, Cambium or CAI, and also with DRC, Data Recognition Corporation, who helps us with our writing scoring. And then, of course, large groups of educators, Utah educators as well. The process that we used, while this slide might be a little confusing, is basically we had a sample of tons of Utah student essays from the past, and we sorted those into just pretty high level, high, medium, and low response essays. And then we broke each of those three different buckets into two. So what would a high look like, and what would a lower high scoring essay look like? We did the same for the medium, and we did the same for a low. So we essentially came out with three different buckets that represented students' six different buckets that represented students, Utah students writing. And then we took a look at each one of those buckets to determine what are the characteristics of these Utah students on demand writing. And we started to list all the different characteristics and the patterns that we started to see for our Utah students in each of those six levels. We used those characteristics to then inform the creation of our new rubric. We then completed a rubric validation study, again with Utah educators, to really get specific and even adjust at the word level what are the right ways to describe these six different levels of our students' writing. And that became the basis for our new rubrics. So, again, we started to look at all writing, especially our RISE writing, as on-demand writing. We know that when you're sitting down with your students to do this writing on RISE, that again, it's typically going to be in 1 or 2 sessions. This is not something that they normally experience in the classroom where they go through the entire writing process, where they have time for peer review and getting feedback and going through multiple drafts. So we shifted the mindset to on-demand writing and really truly understanding when it's normally just one time to go through this, what is that going to look like? So please do note that these rubrics reflect on-demand writing. They do not reflect writing that would have gone through the entire writing process like you typically give time for over even several weeks in the classroom. So we now have new rubrics for 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and then we have a combined 7th, 8th rubric because, as you know, our standards have now combined 7th and 8th grade. And for each of these grades, there are 2 rubrics. In the past, we had one rubric with 3 different dimensions. That rubric is gone. It is retired. We are no longer using it. That old rubric had conventions, and then it had evidence and elaboration, and then I think focus, purpose, and topic. Am I saying that one right? Organization. Okay. Basically, essentially, what we now have, since those 3 categories are gone, that rubric's retired, we now have 2 completely separate rubrics, one for each grade that is just dedicated to conventions. You will notice that the conventions one is similar in every single grade. And then we have another rubric that is dedicated to all the good content of the writing, the meat of the writing, right? It's going to include purpose, organization, evidence, elaboration, and everything. Each of these separate rubrics are going to be on a 6-step scale, okay? Please do not combine the 2 rubrics, the conventions and this new content, into try to get 1 score. We do not want that to happen. They should live separately always. So we don't want to say, oh, well, it's really out of 12 and my student got 8 out of 12. Don't do that. Okay, because that won't have any meaning to anyone. We want it to just be looking at this one rubric out of the 6 steps and this other out of the 6 steps. You will not get any scaled scores with the rubrics. You haven't been getting scaled scores on the writing rubrics for years. The scale scores were taken out when writing was removed from all grades, so that you should be used to. You will only get rubric-based scores on RISE. Benchmarks if we get enough people participating, but definitely for summative. These rubrics, again, they will be used for the benchmarks and summative. I'm not seeing any new questions. That's a good sign for me. Hopefully, there's clarity in what Megan is saying on a Friday afternoon. Thank you all for hanging in there with me as I'm losing my voice as we speak. So, for your pleasure, here is a sneak peek, and then we're going to share the full thing with you. You are most likely some of the first educators in Utah to be looking at these. Yay! Unless people went and actually found them on their own because they were just released like 2 days ago. Okay, so this is just level 4 of the 5th grade informative explanatory rubric. The reason we wanted to share just level 4 is because level 4 is going to be considered meeting the grade level standard. They have met the full standard, the full depth and breadth of that writing standard. If a student got a 5 or a 6, that does not mean they are writing above grade level. It means that the student is utilizing that grade level standard at a higher sophistication. Okay. So, for example, with 6th grade, a student can get a 6 on argumentative, but that doesn't mean they're writing at a 7th or 8th grade level because it wouldn't have to introduce a counterclaim, right? We're going to show you where to access these rubrics in just a moment. So you will note that how this just the level 4, it will always say, and each level will say that the response demonstrates the ability to, so all the rubrics at those levels will have that opening. And then it'll give the characteristics of a score point 4. And again, that is meeting the grade level standard. You will also note and see something new, and it says the response may. And this is where we're really trying to account for the fact that this is on-demand writing that hasn't gone through that full writing process. Have minor lapses in organization. We get it. It's on-demand writing. They don't have time to go through that whole revision process. Might have loosely related material for their evidence. Not have a clear introduction or conclusion. We get that because, again, we really wanted to take into account the fact that this is on-demand writing. And it might actually use a little more formulaic language in their writing. So, will a 5th grade student be knocked down if they introduce a counter argument? Oh, no. They wouldn't. That would be awesome. We would love to see it. They're not going to get a higher score because we're not looking for that component, but boy, we would love it regardless.
Chances are, if they're using counterclaims, that they probably are a better writer anyway and are more likely to get a 5 or a 6 on it. But just using a counterclaim does not guarantee that that's going to get you a higher score for that 5th grade essay. The rest of it has to be good
Okay,
too.
I think it's finally me done talking. Okay.
It is. Take a break, take a drink. So our writing rubrics are available on the RISE portal. They just got put on there, I think last Friday, and then all fixed and everything nicely for everybody to be able to see them. So if you go into the RISE portal, if you select resources and then go down and select RISE writing rubrics, and then you can choose your grade level rubric and then also the conventions rubric. Then you'll be able to see those. So we're going to give everybody some time to do that. And we're going to have you break into some breakout rooms and look through those rubrics and have some discussion about what you're seeing about that. So I'm going to give everybody some time to go on the RISE portal. Let's see.
So I just put that in the chat for the link, and there the directions are on how to get there. So we want to give everyone a chance to get there. I just got a question. Each rubric is going to be on a 6-step level. So they will get a score of either one on the rubric through 6. So they could get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6 on that rubric, and then the conventions rubric, again, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or 5, or 6. Again, we're asking you to not combine them into 12.
There is a question in the chat. If students can complete their writing portion in more than one session, so they do not have to complete it in just one session. It could be 4 sessions if that's what it requires for that student to complete it. We recommend not quite that many sessions because the productivity tends to go down. But if that's what's needed, that's allowable. So they can go back and work on that same writing prompt again.
And Bernice, bless you for asking that question. The conventions rubric is still on a 6-point scale, but it'll be reported out of 3. So it is still on a 6-level scale. It will be reported out of 3. So thank you. Actually, that was a mistake that I said. So they will get a 0.5 out of 3, a 1 out of 3, a 1.5 out of 3. Teresa, do you want me to speak to why we have that one at a lower scale? Or
No,
do you want to?
I'm happy to. So we just wanted to make sure that we were messaging that although conventions are important, they're not the meat of the writing, right? The meat of the writing is that the organization and the evidence that you're using and having all of those pieces. And so we wanted to just show that through those points. Because if people do put the points together, we want the other one to show more. So, Rebecca, so RISE summative assessments shouldn't be used for grades unless it's increasing students' grades, not decreasing their grades. So that's a discussion you'd need to have with your school, your district, in order to figure out what you're doing with that.
But Rebecca, if we did get enough people participating in the benchmarks, I feel like a broken record. I'm begging at this point, folks. I'll be honest. Get those students doing them. If we do have benchmarks and you use those in the future, you can change that scoring to however you like with those benchmarks. So and really, they're both on 6-step levels. But if you're talking about the summative, definitely get direction from your district, because using summative scores for grading, definitely there are implications and rules attached to that in law and in state and board rule. So good question. And also, I'll say it, we know we're all creatures of habit. We're going to have 2 rubrics. We want to combine them, and it's probably going to happen a lot. So this was also an attempt to show really, truly, we don't want the big focus to be on conventions. We know that conventions really should be taught in context, not in isolation, in like a DOL format. So we really want to stress that the content is what matters, because conventions really need to be taught through context and in content. And that's not where most of our instruction should be lying, especially when it comes to writing. So that is a whole other training that we can get into, though.
And Julie, yes, we did not change the characteristics of score points to this 0.5 through 3. We'll work with our vendor, get that changed. At the last minute, we decided to change those from being 1 to 6 to being 0.5 to 3. So thank you for catching that. There will not be a final score. When the RISE provides a score, it's going to provide two individual scores and not one score. So you're going to get 2 writing scores, one that's for the conventions rubric and one that's for all the rest of the writing.
And again, they won't be, sorry, Teresa.
Yeah, so that we will never be combining scores on the score reports that you receive.
Nor will they ever be translated into the proficiency levels that you get on the reading test. So you're not going to have, a 4 or a 2.5 is, below or approaching or proficient, it is just going to be a rubric score. So again, they shouldn't be put on proficiency levels. Know that that fourth step on both rubrics, that is meeting the standard. So you can consider that fourth step proficient in the standard. They've met the entire standard with their on-demand writing.
For this writing prompt. Proficiency scores are only calculated for our ELA assessment. This is just a rubric-based score, so it's just based straightly off the rubric and whatever category the student's writing meets is the score that they are going to receive.
They will not factor into the ELA assessment.
Rebecca, the examples for conventions, I believe you can find those in the core guides, examples of like more grade level specific conventions, because it is not listed specifically in the standards anymore.
Yeah. And I can speak to this topic a little more. Please do note that when the standards were revised, they were revised by your Utah educators and colleagues. And again, knowing that best practice is conventions really shouldn't be taught in isolation. The convention standards were spread across all the other standards. So they didn't necessarily just disappear. They disappeared in the fact that they're not isolated as language standards anymore. They were really more brought into the other standards because we know that good language instruction, it's going to be taught in context. So through their reading, through their speaking and listening, and through their writing, we see that these conventions most heavily, these convention kind of language standards most heavily now lie in the writing standards. You're going to see that they are a little more vague. Yes, and that was very intentional. And the reason why they're vague is because they used to be very prescriptive. We're going to do a semicolon at this grade. We're going to do a comma at that grade. And then we're going to do this modifier here. And the truth of the matter is you as educators, you know where your students are and what they are ready to be introduced to best. So we're not going to hold semicolons hostage anymore in just this grade, right? If you know in your students, because it's the appropriate context and they are ready, because you know your students best, to say, listen, we're going to discuss semicolons today because you're ready for it. And I know it, right? Because I work with you on a daily basis. And guess what? Some grades might be ready for it before other grades. And it just depends on how your schools and your districts and charters vertically team and how you plan things out. This is a way for you as districts and charters to start to take back a little more control of what's appropriate and when for our students when it comes to these different skills, right? You all know your students best. And if, again, I'm using semicolons a lot here because I do love a good semicolon. Just like a good Oxford comma. I'm a believer in that. If they're ready to be introduced to that concept, then you can, and you know because you vertically team, meaning your third grade plans with your fourth grade plans with your fifth grade, and we know when we're going to be introducing different concepts. And it's also okay to say, guess what? I have a great class that's going really fast this year. I am going to introduce some more sophisticated concepts to them because they're ready to. And I'm going to let everyone know, and no one's going to get mad at me because I took their book or I took their content or I took their semicolon, right? So we can't get territorial over our conventions anymore. So hopefully that helps give a little more freedom in your own teaching to best respond to your students' needs. All right, Teresa, do you want me to move on?
See, well, we were gonna do allow people to go into some breakout rooms and look at those rubrics and have some discussions in some smaller groups than just this whole giant session. So I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to choose a room. So if you are with other people, you can coordinate with them and say, hey, let's go to the same room. If you're in a room full of people right now, then you don't need to join a breakout room at all. And just go ahead and have that discussion within your own room. So you should, the idea is that at least one person's pulled up the rubrics. Hopefully everybody's pulling up the rubrics, and then you're going to just look at what those rubrics are and have a discussion. So if you want to go to the next slide real fast. So thinking, what do you notice? What changes do you need to make to your writing instruction? How are you going to utilize this rubric in your instruction? And what changes do your students need to make as they're approaching writing in order to be successful with this new rubric and those new writing prompts? So those are kind of some ideas of things that you can be thinking about as you look at those writing rubrics and have that discussion in your breakout rooms. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. Please select where you would like to go. If you're with a group, you can just have your discussion in your room.
And yes, y'all can print these out. We would love that. Inform the students, bring them into the process. This is their success criteria. It should be transparent.
So if you are not able to see, if you select the little more button, it's going to bring up and allow you to select for the breakout room. The rubrics are available on the RISE portal.
I will repost that again.
Under the resources tab. So if you go into resources and then select writing rubrics. So if you're not able to see the breakout room, go ahead and go to the more button. And then you can select breakout room from there, and then you'll be able to join a room.
Michelle, right now, Maureen Rushing is currently overseeing Utah Compose. We will be shifting things and having someone be over that, but right now, emergency contact for Utah Compose is Maureen Rushing. The core guides are not on the RISE site, just the rubrics are. Sorry. I'm going to go back to this slide so people can see that. Rebecca, we actually have a link later on for the core guides in this slideshow. So stay tuned. Teresa, do you want to copy and paste maybe the discussion questions into the chat? Since I'll stay on this one so people can navigate to the rubrics.
Yeah, if you go to the more button on your Zoom, then you should be able to see breakout rooms listed as an option. And if you select that, then it'll give you an option to select. Megan, do you know where it is on an iPad?
Normally on iPads, you can scroll to different things, like there's different screens you can have, but you should be able to see your controls if you tap on the screen, and then it should give you options.
Tanya. Utah Compose can be a great formative assessment tool that you can utilize within your classroom. Like I had said, noted earlier in the chat, some of the areas within the Utah Compose grading that they do align better to our standards and our new RISE writing rubrics than others. So I would, if I were using Utah Compose as a teacher, I would not be looking so much at that overall score as I would be looking at like those different sub scores that better align to our standards. And so, like for example, word choice isn't one that's as much aligned to our standards. It is a part of it, but it's not as big. Whereas organization is a huge part of our standards, and so I'd want to look at that organization score and do my students have organization? So if I were using Utah Compose, I would probably, because I did use Utah Compose as a teacher, and I know that if students write a lot, that they tend to get a better score, even if their writing's not great. So I would just make sure that you use that carefully and don't just say, oh, they're a great writer because they wrote a whole bunch and Utah Compose gave them a great score. I'd want to make sure that you're looking also at those sub scores and also looking at the student writing itself and making sure that you agree that it does align with these new rubrics and our new standards for writing.
We have discussed at the state level doing a crosswalk between the two. Um, but honestly, we have so much on our plates. We haven't even gotten into the planning stage of that. So hopefully that's on a future to-do list. As you know, we all wear many hats, so getting the new assessment and rubrics was the most important thing. And thank you, Elise, for helping our iPad and iPhone users.
Megan, if you want to go on 2 slides. Next one. Okay. So hopefully if you didn't join a group that you were still taking that time to take a look at those rubrics. I know it wasn't enough time to really dive into the specifics, but I just wanted to have a group discussion and thinking about what could you share from your discussion or your observations that would benefit the whole group. So whether you are welcome to drop that in the chat or come off mute and share some things that you noticed or changes that you're going to make to writing instruction or things your students need to do.
I will share a great question that I was asked during that time. Someone asked, will the students get both argumentative and informative this year? Nope, the students will still only get one writing prompt and it'll be randomly assigned as to which genre it will be. So again, that will remain the same for 5th and 8th grade. So be prepared for one or the other. Be prepared for both.
If you don't sign up for the field testing, you will still be able to access the writing benchmarks this year. We're just asking people to sign up so that we have a better way to gauge whether or not we're going to have enough participation for the scoring. Thanks, Janet. We really feel like these new rubrics are better because we really design them around on-demand writing and that we're hoping that we're going to see some better results from our students. You will not be able to see what students write on the field test. We did talk to our vendor about that. We were really hoping, but it doesn't populate without a score. And because we're not providing score reports for the benchmarks, because we're going to use it to decide what that scoring is going to look like, they weren't able to provide the writing for the teacher. If they do take the benchmark, it is going to be used for the field testing this year. No writing benchmarks will provide automatic scoring for this year. We'll use that to train our scoring engine. Is there a specific window for the field test? Currently, it's going to be the middle of February through the end of March. It might extend through the rest of the school year. We're currently discussing that, and a final decision has not been made about that yet.
So yes, the benchmarks that people do will be used for the field testing for the benchmarks. The summative, those student essays are used for the summative.
And Megan, individual teachers are totally able to fill it out. We've had some of it's school, some of it's an LEA that fills it out, some of it's a teacher. We're just wanting to get numbers. So we are going to be posting some exemplars on the RISE portal for 5th and 8th grade only, because those are the ones that we did the range finding with. So those are the only ones we currently have. So we're hoping to have those posted by the end of this month. There'll be a new section on the resources that says, or it might be under the writing rubrics. that will just outline the exemplars that you can go and look at that are writing with annotation and scoring with the new rubric.
I'm getting told my sound's not great. Is it good?
It is
Kurt?
now. It just wasn't on your last comment.
Okay. Well, welcome to my computer, everybody, on a Friday afternoon.
So we're hoping having the 6 scales is going to better provide you with information on where your students really are within their writing and how you can better support them. Because it's just providing a more delineation between those different levels.
I will say that as many eyes that these have been on these rubrics, been through tons of committees, been reviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Errors still sneak through. As I'm sure all you are, used to also, like, I read over that 10 times and still that one snuck through. If you do ever see an error, please let us know. We will never be offended. We want to get them right. So thank you for letting us know about errors. We would love if anyone wanted to come off of mute to make any comments if you do have questions or any significant aha moments that you had that might be valuable for our whole group's learning.
So we do have some exemplars. We actually used last year's essays from the summative assessment because we're no longer using those prompts. So we're comfortable releasing the material and use the new rubric to assess those. So but we definitely need more field tests in 5th grade for those benchmark assessments. And then next year, there will be automatic scoring on the writing benchmarks, which is why we need it for this year. So then we can train our scoring engine to get automatic scoring for future years until we revise our benchmarks again. And then whoever was coming off mute, if you were coming off to share, please do so.
Mandy.
I was just thinking how I love the rubrics because I was just thinking about how I want to create like a student-friendly rubric. So when they peer review, they can actually go through that, right? And check them off and say, oh yeah, did they do this? No, they didn't. And just, you know what I mean? That could help in the process of them grading each other or even grading their own.
Love that, Mandy. Thank you for sharing. And I would even follow that up with as much as you can using the language of the rubrics and the standards and allowing the students to be able to use that language might even benefit them even more because we will always assess our students using the language of the standards at the state level on the RISE assessments, I should say.
And the language within our prompts is also related to the standards.
Great comment. Anyone else? We'd love anyone else. We know you're like, it's a Friday, don't make us talk. But we'd welcome it.
I really liked how on the rubric, it was just a little bit like between 4 and 5. It was very clear to see what that difference was. It was how the maturity and the sophistication of the writing changed between those two. I thought the language was very clear and was nice to be able to see how that was going to be different.
Thank you. Someone made a comment earlier and I realized we didn't respond to it about the sentence variety appearing on the conventions. So within our standards, it does talk about using a variety of sentences. It talks about at every grade level. Some of them have more specificity around what that looks like. And so we wanted to still capture that, and we felt like it lived better within that conventions rubric. And it really allowed for a greater level of disbursement. So we're not just talking about those traditional spelling, capitalization, punctuation. We're also looking at those more sophisticated use of sentences and that sentence structure and the different variety of sentences that students are using. So it allowed us to create a larger scaled rubric to evaluate that.
Yeah, we love that. It actually gives students like the option to say, would a compound sentence actually be more appropriate to really drive my point home here, right? Versus just, you know, oh goodness, the word's escaping me. A non-compound sentence, right? But like, are we using those little tricks in conventions and language to really help us make our points in argument or in explaining something, right? Thank you, simple sentence. Oh, who would have known? I've been in language arts for 21 years. Not me today.
Sentence variety, we're typically referring to simple, compound, and complex sentences, not the question statement exclamatory. So that's typically at your lower grades. When we look at the standards, it's referring to those simple sentences, more compound, or then even more complex sentences, which you don't see as much at the 5th grade. We're really looking at simple sentences or compound sentences at the 5th grade level. And using those other types of punctuation, right? Like, did they include a semicolon or a colon and then use it correctly? That's going to give you a more complex sentence than if they, never do that.
All right. Would you like me to move on?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so.
We've kind of already addressed
There's
this
a question.
little bit. All right. So we did get a question earlier about annotated samples. Yes, please stay tuned. Those will be coming. Again, begging alert here. If we get enough benchmark examples, hopefully we will be able to draw from those for exemplars as well in the future, also to build out an exemplar bank for the other grades. So the more y'all can help us beg and recruit others to do this with their students, the more we'll be able to provide these resources for all of our Utah educators. So we will have 5th and 8th grade informative and argument samples coming your way. Again, we will make sure that we message that out and put a big update and notification on the RISE portal. The UEN writing collection project, there is a link on this. Teresa, if you don't mind putting that link in the chat as well. She's dumping in a few links. The writing collection project was basically student samples annotated in exemplars, sometimes non-exemplars of student writing at all the different levels with our old RISE writing rubric. Those are still there, but they will be retired soon. So please do be aware we're going to have to take those down since they no longer align to the standards exactly, nor to the assessments that we give. There are still some great resources that can be used, such as writing prompts and text, stimulus text to support those writing prompts. If there is anything you want to get off of there, we suggest you go in there and go and get it, since those will be coming down most likely sometime over the summer. I expect to give people ample time, so we'll start announcing that. But get what you need from that. And then we just wanted to make sure that you know other resources available to you. Again, these we've mentioned and talked to already, but the standards changed, hence why there has been an overhaul to the ELA and writing assessments for the state. Please make sure that everyone has the new standards, okay? So there's a link, and Teresa will drop that in the chat as well, to those new standards. Everyone should have been introduced to these and started teaching them last year. We do every now and then get people saying, I didn't know there were new standards. So hopefully your district has been communicating this with you though. So here's the standards here. The biggest change is literary and information was combined. Grade 3 has a whole new standard. Grade 7, we did see a big shift. We will discuss this shift more in next week's reading assessment training, where 7th grade used to do literary and informational comparisons. Or now I'm starting to second guess myself because there's been so much information going through my brain. And now they
Right.
have to do literary compared to literary. So that was something that was new and shifted. There's more focus on speaking rather than listening. So you'll notice that all the speaking and listening standards, every single one of those standards does require the production of speaking in some way or shape or form. The language standards, again, have been mainly incorporated into the writing standards. We talked about that quite a bit. And the writing standards no longer say elaboration, but again, it is implied by connecting it all together. That is that elaboration of drawing those connections for everyone. So elaboration is still expected. It's just not the exact same wording anymore. And then the links to the core guides. These core guides are somewhat living documents. There's going to be updates to these core guides. I would expect these to be updated maybe for next year. That's another project. But again, here's the standard. Each core guide, there's one for each grade level. What are the concepts and skills to master? What's the critical background knowledge that students need in order to be able to even enter into this standard to master it? What are related standards? What's the academic language that students should be introduced to? Because again, we really want you to be using the language of the standards and the students to be familiar with that language. And then there are some assessment exemplars on how you could formatively assess this in your class. But again, these will be updated. The more we get into these standards and get good feedback from our educators, the more we'll be updating these. And those, Teresa, already linked. Yay. And we have about 4 minutes. So we wanted to first thank you all for being here with us today, taking a Friday afternoon. We'll put a plug in for next Friday to join us for the reading changes. That's going to cover RISE and Utah Aspire Plus. So we'll be covering what you can expect to see for reading grades 3 through 10. And then again, here is our contact information. I'm going to say thank you for being here with us. We'll open it up to questions in a moment, but we would love to ask you to help us be ambassadors for our state tests and share this knowledge that you've gained today with your colleagues. Please point them to all these resources. Say, watch this recording, or here's a screenshot, or even say, hey, to your administrator, or maybe you're a person that is an administrator at the district or charter leadership level, and you can say, hey, I just was made aware of all these changes. Here it is. This is going to help you a ton. And of course, ask us questions as much as you can. Is the training next week the same one that you did in November? It's going to be very similar, but we're only going to focus on the reading, and we'll get a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of those changes, but very, very similar otherwise. Great question.
And I did post in the chat a link to an attendance survey. So if you want credit for attending today in Midas, please fill out that attendance survey, and that will be how we're going to be using to give credit in Midas. So it's people who all just left, they attended without getting credit. So please fill out that attendance survey. If you don't care, then don't worry about it.
We want you to get credit so you can get your lane changes.
Yes, we do.
Or
That's why we're providing it.
After reading your license.
Hey,
But-
Teresa. Oh, sorry, or
Kristen,
Megan.
Go
This
for it, Tammy. Go for it.
I just wanted to clarify for the writing, then it is going to be on science or social studies, but it's based upon maybe a previous year of something entailed in that. I'm just concerned because we have a new curriculum and we have very little time for social studies. So I'm wanting to make sure, should I be teaching? I don't know, or maybe I shouldn't say stuff like that, but I just want to make sure
So-
that I'm giving the good
I-
foundation.
Yeah, what I will say is that it is designed that if a student has no prior experience with the content, that there is enough information in the passages for the writing that the student can still be successful with the writing.
Okay. Okay.
So we very much look at that to think like, is there enough information that a student could know nothing about this topic and still be able to answer? Yes. If not, we don't use it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll
I will
stay
drop
on.
I will drop
I
the
dropped it
attendance link in
again.
there again.
Yeah.
Probably
we'll
just
keep
getting
going.
lost.
Okay, I had one quick question, and you'll probably answer this next week, but I'm just dying. So we won't have any ELA test results until fall for any of the grades. Is that accurate? Okay. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else has questions, you're welcome to post them in the chat. Come off and mute. We'll stay here for a few more minutes. Thank you all. Have just an amazing weekend. Happy New Year.
So there was a question. It says that the fifth grade one uses the word evidence in the wording, and formative explanatory uses says quotes, facts, details, examples. The difference really between that is thinking about when we're providing information, we have to provide quotes and details and facts or examples in order to be outlining that information. When we're talking about an argument, we want evidence to support that argument. And so, yes, evidence is also going to use quotes from the text as the evidence, but it's really thinking about what does that mean? We don't provide evidence for informative writing. We provide examples and facts and details versus argumentative writing, where we're really looking at evidence to support the claim.
There aren't any RISE math trainings coming up since those standards still are going through revision, but I know that once those standards are revised, Jared Wright and Katie Bars will be doing this roadshow too. So stay tuned. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen if that's okay.